Isaac Clarke was born on June 5th, 2461, along the eastern seaboard of the American Republic, in the North American sector of Earth. His life began beneath the shadow of legacy and absence. His father, Paul Clarke, was a celebrated ship architect for the Galactic Union Merchant Marine Corps. Brilliant, ambitious, and rarely home. Before Isaac was old enough to recognize his face, Paul had departed on an extended mission that would keep him away for much of his son's childhood. That absence left Isaac to be raised almost entirely by his mother, Octavia. Though loving and protective, Octavia bore the weight of loneliness, like a silent wound. With her husband gone for years on end, the house felt hollow, and the ache of isolation grew heavier with time. At the urging of a psychiatrist, she sought companionship beyond her walls. What began as an attempt to fill the void soon led her into the arms of a growing faith, the Church of Unitology. For Isaac, these were the earliest forces that shaped his world, a father defined by duty but never present, and a mother drawn to a doctrine that promised community, purpose, and perhaps comfort in the sounds her husband left behind. As Isaac grew, it became clear he carried his father's gift for machines, numbers, circuits, engines. These things spoke to him in ways words never could. Like his father, he dreamed of starships and systems, of taking part in humanity's great expansion beyond the cradle of Earth. His talent did not go unnoticed. In time, he was accepted into one of the most prestigious engineering colleges, a place that could have set the course of his future among the stars. But dreams cost credits, and credits were something Isaac did not have. When the time came to pay tuition, he learned the bitter truth. His mother had emptied their savings. Octavia, once just a lonely woman searching for belonging, had poured everything into the Church of Unitology, purchasing a vested-level title that promised her status and spiritual fulfillment. To Isaac, it was betrayal in the purest form. The Church had stolen his chance before it even began, trading his future for empty words and symbols carved in stone. The disappointment hardened into something darker. Distrust, resentment, and eventually a simmering hatred for Unitology itself. From that moment on, Isaac vowed never to be fooled by their promises, nor to forgive what they had taken from him. Though the doors of prestige had closed to him, Isaac refused to surrender his future. Determined and stubborn in equal measure, he found another path. With the help of scholarships and scattered financial assistance, he enrolled at a smaller, lesser-known college, far from the gleaming halls of the academy that had once beckoned him. It wasn't easy. Every day was a fight against scarcity and exhaustion, but Isaac poured himself into his work. What he lacked in resources, he made up in relentless drive. By the time he graduated, it was with high honors, proof that talent and determination could shine even without privilege. Several years later, following the footsteps of his father he barely knew, Isaac enlisted in the Galactic Union Merchant Marine Corps. The service tested him in ways no classroom ever could. Aboard vast starships, under the weight of responsibility and the constant presence of danger, he thrived. His superiors quickly came to see him not as another uniform, but as an engineer capable of solving problems no manual could anticipate. In the silent corridors of ships adrift and the chaos of systems failing, Isaac Clarke proved himself again and again. An innovator, a survivor, and his father's son in more ways than he could ever admit. By 2505, the weight of loneliness had finally broken Octavia Clarke. Years of waiting for a husband who never returned. Years of pouring herself into Unitology only to find the promises hollow. Her mind began to unravel. She was admitted to a psychiatric center, where the sounds of empty corridors replaced the echo of her long, solitary nights. Assigned to her case was Dr. Nicole Brennan, a young psychiatrist who had made her mission to help those caught in the Triss's grip. Calm, compassionate, and unshaken by Octavia's spiraling devotion, Nicole became a guiding light through the fog of indoctrination. It was during those sessions that Isaac first crossed paths with her. At first, he was simply the dutiful son visiting his mother, but in Nicole he found something he had long been missing: warmth, understanding, and a presence that made the noise of his past quiet for a while. What began as conversations born of circumstance slowly grew into something more. Against the backdrop of Octavia's decline, Isaac and Nicole discovered one another, and from that unlikely place, a romance began to take root. In 2507, opportunity came calling, though not for Isaac, but for Nicole. A position had opened aboard the USG Ishimura, the legendary planet cracker whose name alone carried weight across the colonies. The ship was nearing the end of her long service life, with decommissioning scheduled in just a year, and the opening for senior medical officer promised a chance to be part of history before the vessel was retired. Nicole hesitated. She was content where she was, grounded, steady, and with Isaac. The life they had built together was quiet but fulfilling, and the thought of leaving it behind for the cold void of space gave her pause. But Isaac, ever the realist and dreamer entwined, saw it differently. He urged her not to let the chance slip by, reminding her that she would regret passing up the opportunity to serve aboard a ship as storied as the Ishimura. With his encouragement and in no small amount of persuasion, Nicole finally agreed. She applied, was accepted, and soon after became part of the medical staff aboard the ship that had defined a generation of deep space mining. For Nicole, it was the beginning of a bold new chapter. Not long before Nicole's departure, a ghost from Isaac's past returned. His father. After decades of absence, Clarke finally came home from his tour with the Merchant Marine Corps. The reunion was jarring, almost surreal. For Isaac, it was a face he had only ever known in memory and photographs. Now standing before him, aged but resolute. For Octavia, it was something more, a fragile hope, believing that his presence could help heal the wounds of her long decline. Nicole made a difficult decision to release Octavia from the psychiatric center, allowing her to return home to her husband. When the time came for Nicole to board the Ishimura, she reached out to Isaac one last time before departure. Her voice over the comm carried both gratitude and warmth. She thanked him for urging her to seize the opportunity, believing in her when she doubted herself. Isaac, the thought of her being gone for 6 long months gnawed at him, set his own feelings aside. He told her he was proud, that he was happy for her, and for a moment, despite the distance already forming between them, he truly was. But whatever peace Paul's return had offered was short-lived. Octavia's mind, long fractured by loneliness in the clutches of Unitology, slipped once more into the shadow. Reunion with her husband had stirred old wounds rather than healed them, and soon after the decline reached a breaking point. In a single horrific night, Octavia murdered Paul before turning the weapon on herself. For Isaac, the news was shattering, but it was what came after that carved the wound deeper. The Church of Unitology moved swiftly, claiming both bodies before Isaac could even see them. When he demanded their return, the Church refused, hiding behind ritual and doctrine. Octavia, he discovered, had signed her last will and testament in their favor, giving Unitology the legal right to his parents' remains. To Isaac, it was theft disguised as faith, one last betrayal that denied him closure. Grief twisted into anger, and in his despair he reached out to the only person he thought he could lean on, Nicole. Yet his words came not as pleas but as blame, accusing her of failing his mother, of letting this happen. Nicole, stunned and wounded by his cruelty, ended the call with fury, leaving Isaac in silence once more, isolated in the cold gravity of his own loss. In 2508, as the Ishimura began its ill-fated operation over Aegis VII, a transmission reached Isaac. It was from Nicole. Her voice trembled with the weight of regret as she apologized for the last argument, for the anger had separated them when they both needed each other most. For a fleeting moment, Isaac felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this was a chance to mend what had been broken. But the message was not what it seemed. The truth became clear as the transmission played out. This was not a call for reunion. It was a farewell. Nicole had taken her own life. Isaac couldn't bear it. Before the final, undeniable moments of the recording, he cut the feed. In his mind, he reshaped the truth. Nicole wasn't gone. She was still alive. Still waiting for him to save her. He was eager to believe in the lie than face the reality that the last person he loved, the last tether he had to humanity, had been lost to the void. When the distress call from the Ishimura went out, Isaac didn't hesitate. He volunteered for the emergency response team assigned to the USG Ishimura, determined to uncover the truth, and above all, to find Nicole. Officially, their mission was straightforward: investigate the blackout aboard the Ishimura, determine the status of its crew, and restore communications. Unofficially, Isaac carried out his own purpose, one far more personal than any directive from EarthGov. Ishimura had been last reported orbiting Aegis VII, where it was engaged in an illegal planet crack that few dared to speak of openly. Now, the ship hung in silence above the fractured world, its comms nothing but static. As the Killian approached, the crew tried again and again to hail her, but no voices answered. Only the empty hum of interference filled the channels. Then came the docking maneuver, which should have been routine, went catastrophically wrong. Systems glitched, guidance protocols failed, and before the crew could correct their course, the Killian was hurled into the Ishimura's bay in a violent crash landing. Metal screamed as the shuttle tore into the deck, sparks showering the cabin in bursts of orange firelight. When the chaos subsided, the damage was clear. The Killian had lost their port booster and was crippled. The team had made it aboard, but barely, and as the dust settled in the ruined landing bay, Isaac couldn't shake the gnawing dread that their mission had already gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. The crew of the Killian disembarked into the silent corridors of the Ishimura. At first, the emptiness was unsettling but manageable. Darkened halls, flickering lights, and a ship that felt less abandoned than watching. The further they pressed into the flight lounge, the stronger the sense of wrongness became. Tools lay scattered where they had been dropped, consoles set powered but unmanned, and yet there was no sign of the thousands of crew members who should have been aboard. Then the silence broke. Shapes emerged from the vents and shadows, grotesque parodies of human form, their twisted limbs ending in blades of bone. What had been once the crew of the Ishimura had been reshaped by something unnatural, their bodies repurposed into weapons of flesh and rage. Panic erupted as the creatures descended upon the team, tearing through armor and flesh alike. The firefight was chaos. Screams, gunfire, blood slicking the metal deck. One by one, members of the response team were cut down, until only 3 remained standing. Isaac Clarke, the engineer thrust into survival. Enter Daniels, the calculating computer specialist. And Zach Hammond, the battle-tested chief security officer. The rest were dead. In the chaos of the flight lounge, Isaac was torn away from Hammond and Kendra, forced to flee down a corridor as the Necromorphs closed in. He barely managed to escape, ducking into a rattling service elevator that carried him deeper into the ship. Alone, cut off from his comrades but still tethered to them through the faint crackle of the ray communications, Isaac found himself thrust into a role he had never sought, that of the only one capable of keeping the Ishimura alive long enough for anyone to escape. Task after task fell on his shoulders. Power conduits had to be rerouted, engines coaxed back to life, and entire systems reset, all while the ship's twisted corridors crawled with the dead. Every hallway was a gauntlet, and yet Isaac endured. Through his determination and skill, the Ishimura stirred again under his hands. At last a glimmer of hope appeared. Using the ship's mining operations, Isaac armed and deployed his SOS beacon, attaching it to an asteroid before ejecting it from the mining hold. The signal cut through the void, and for the first time since boarding the Ishimura, there was an answer. A military vessel, the USM Valor, picked up the distress call and came racing to their aid. But salvation turned swiftly to horror. Unaware of what they had recovered, crew of the Valor brought aboard his escape pod jettisoned earlier from the Ishimura. Inside was no survivor. Within moments of being brought aboard, the creature tore through the Valor's crew. By the time Isaac and the others realized what had happened, the warship meant to save them had already become another graveyard. The USM Valor never had a chance. With his crew slaughtered and his decks crawling with necromorphs, the warship became a derelict engine of destruction, drifting wildly through the void. Its trajectory brought it slamming into the Ishimura, the collision tearing through steel and plating in a violent scream of metal against metal. Fires erupted, alarms shrieked, and the shock of impact rippled through the mining vessel like a death knell. Amid the chaos, one last hope emerged, the Valor's singularity core. If Isaac and the others could recover it, there was a chance they might still escape this nightmare. Against impossible odds, Isaac fought his way aboard the ruined warship, its once proud halls now overrun with the same atrocities that had consumed the Ishimura. The mission succeeded, the core was retrieved, but the cost was devastating. As Isaac and Hammond struggled to withdraw, the past came to haunt them. Their comrade, Aiden Shen, who was once aboard the Killian, now a grotesque necromorph, struck with merciless fury. Hammond fell beneath the claws of the thing that had once bored his friend's face, giving Isaac no choice but to flee. When the echoes of Hammond's screams faded, Isaac was left with the crushing truth. He and Kendra were now the only survivors of the Killian, alone together, two souls against the nightmare that had consumed hundreds. They pressed on, not because they believed they could win, because there was no other choice. Back aboard the Ishimura, Isaac's path took an unexpected turn. Amid the chaos and slaughter, he was contacted by Dr. Terrence Kine, one of the last surviving members of the ship's science team. Kine spoke with frenetic urgency of a man who knew the truth. The red marker, Marker 3A, had to be returned to the colony of Aegis VII. Only by placing it back upon its pedestal could the signal be neutralized, severing the Necromorph's link to their master, the hive mind. At first, Isaac hesitated. Trust was a scarce thing on Ishimura, but something in Kine's desperation rang true, and Isaac, grasping for any hope to end the nightmare, agreed to help. When the Valor Singularity Core in hand, he restored power to the executive shuttle, preparing it for descent. For a fleeting moment, it seemed there might be an end in sight. As Kine stood ready to depart, a shot rang out. He collapsed in a pool of his own blood, cut down not by Necromorph's claws, but by Kendra Daniels, the computer specialist, his last remaining ally from the Kalian. She was not there for survival. She was there for EarthGov. Her voice was cold, her words deliberate as she laid bare the truth. Everything that had happened at Aegis VII was a result of meddling with the marker, a government project abandoned centuries earlier but secretly preserved. The Church of Unitology had worshipped it, the CEC had exploited it, but it was EarthGov that had orchestrated the secrecy. And now, she declared, the markers would be contained, taken into the hands of EarthGov, far from Isaac, far from Aegis VII. With Kine dead and the marker stolen, Isaac was left betrayed, stranded and more alone than ever. Isaac wandered the dying halls of Ishimura, certain that Kendra's betrayal had sealed his fate. But then, against all reason, Nicole appeared. She was there, alive, reaching out to him with a calm certainty. Her presence was a balm against the storm, and in his despair, Isaac clung to her without question. Nicole urged him to finish what Kine had begun, take the marker back to the surface of Aegis VII, and return it to its resting place. Driven by her words and the desperate need to believe she still lived, Isaac recalled the executive shuttle, forcing Kendra to abandon ship in a fury and eject an escape pod. With Nicole at his side, he guided the shuttle down through the fractured skies of Aegis VII, landing amid the scarred landscape left by the planet Clarke. At last, Isaac completed the impossible. He dragged the marker across the ruins of the colony, through the swarms of Necromorphs, until finally he placed it back upon its pedestal. In that moment, the air itself seemed to shudder. A massive pulse ripped outward, silencing the Necromorphs and burning into Isaac's very mind, searing the marker's alien blueprints into his consciousness. For the first time since the nightmare began, it felt as though victory was within reach. But the relief was short-lived. The pulse had also undone the gravity tethers, keeping the fractured chunk of Aegis VII suspended in orbit. With a low, apocalyptic groan, the rock began to fall, dragged back towards the planet's surface. And then, as if to mock his triumph, Kendra reappeared. She emerged from the shadows, calm and merciless, and once more seized the marker. She lifted her from its pedestal, declaring her intent to deliver it into EarthGov's hands. Kendra's final betrayal was not with the weapon, but with the truth. Before abandoning him to his fate on Aegis VII, she looked Isaac in the eye and told him what he refused to hear. He was not sane. There was no Nicole. There never was. With cold precision, she forced him to watch the end of Nicole's recording, the part he had always cut short. In it, Nicole's voice broke, her face lined with despair, as she admitted she could not endure the horrors aboard the Ishimura. The truth was laid bare. She had taken her own life during the outbreak, long before Isaac's desperate arrival. The marker had not only twisted flesh into monstrosity, it had twisted Isaac's mind, weaving hallucination in Nicole's likeness to guide him, to use him. In the cruelest revelation of all, he had never been truly following Nicole. He had been shadowing Elizabeth Cross, a scientist equally consumed by her grief, whose own delusions mirrored his. The marker had made them puppets, dancing on the same strings. Kendra's pulled a silent cross before Isaac could even process it, leaving him hollow and reeling. Her words cut deeper than any Necromorph's claws. She told him that the manipulation was not entirely the marker's doing. That it was his own fault too. His refusal to face Nicole's death, his desperate clinging to denial, had opened the door for the marker to worm itself into his mind. Broken and despondent, Isaac staggered back towards the shuttle bay, but salvation was once again ripped from him. Before his eyes, the hive mind, an immense, breathing titan of flesh and bone, erupted from the ground and seized Kendra, tearing her apart with casual brutality before he could even reach her. Then his attention turned to him. What followed was a battle born not of hope, but of sheer survival. Alone, armed with only his wits and dwindling weapons, Isaac fought the hive mind in the shadow of Aegis VII's falling rock. Every strike against the colossal abomination was a defiance of despair itself, and at last, he brought it crashing down. The beast collapsed, silenced at last, but the victory felt empty. With the hive mind slain and the colony collapsing around him, Isaac staggered aboard the executive shuttle. The engines roared to life, and in a violent burst of fire and steel, the shuttle tore free of Aegis VII's atmosphere. Behind him, the fractured continent gave way. The entire tectonic load crashing down in a cataclysm that erased the entire colony in an instant. Isaac had escaped barely. His survival felt hollow. The shuttle was silent. The stars cold beyond the viewport, and in that solitude he turned once more to Nicole's final message. He watched her face flicker across the screen, her voice raw with sorrow. A confession unspooling like a blade pressed into his chest. She was gone. She had been gone all along. As the recording ended, Isaac slumped back into his seat, exhausted and empty. But then, movement, a reflection in the glass beside him. He turned, and there she was, Nicole, her features twisted, grotesque, lunging at him with a shriek that cut through the silence. The shuttle filled with terror and madness, and Isaac's scream rose in the void. Whether he had survived the horrors of the Ishimura, or whether he had simply gone completely insane, was a question no one would ever answer. Time lost all meaning for Isaac after his escape. Alone in the drifting shuttle, the silence of space pressed in on him, broken only by the whispering voice of one person he could not let go of. Nicole. She was there with him again, as vivid and insistent as ever, her presence both comforting and suffocating. He spoke to her freely now, no longer resisting, no longer questioning. The walls of the shuttle bore testament to his unraveling. Strange angular glyphs sprawled across the bulkheads, marker symbols etched in desperation, scrawled in frenzy. The designs had poured from his mind without effort, unbidden, as though his very thoughts had been hijacked. Nicole, bloodied and spectral, leaned close, her voice a soft command wrapped in affection. They needed to go home. There was still much work to do. And Isaac, lost in the haze of madness and manipulation, smiled through his exhaustion. He whispered back that he would build something for her, something she would like. Isaac's freedom lasted only moments in the scale of the stars. Not long after fleeing the ruins of Aegis VII, the shuttle was intercepted by the EarthGov recovery patrol. To the crew who had pulled him aboard, he was just a broken survivor clinging to life. To EarthGov, however, he was something far more valuable. They sealed him in a stasis chamber and ferried him to Titan Station, where he disappeared into the machinery of government secrecy. There, under the sterile glow of the Titan Memorial Medical Center, Isaac became a centerpiece of a project whispered about only in classified reports. Project Telomere. He was not alone. Others like the scientist Nolan Strauss were confined alongside him, but while they were patients on paper, in truth they were subjects, trapped in a living experiment. Isaac spent the next 3 years inside the psych ward, his mind framed beneath the marker's relentless influence. The doctors labeled it dementia, but it was something far stranger. His behavior shifted between obsession and paranoia, repeating alien phrases linked to the marker's construction, scrawling symbols across walls and floors with manic precision, lashing out violently at staff or fellow inmates when the hallucinations grew too strong. And always, there was Nicole. To Isaac, she lingered at the edge of every thought, her voice a constant torment. One moment he wept for her loss, drowning in guilt. The next he believed she still lived, reaching out for him, in desperate need of his help. The line between memory and hallucination blurred until Isaac no longer knew where his mind ended and the marker's will began. EarthGov wasted no time exploiting the knowledge buried in Isaac's fractured mind. The imprint left by Marker 3A became the foundation for their most ambitious and dangerous project yet. Site 12, a massive marker built deep within Titan Station, Officials spoke of harnessing his signal as a limitless power source, a miracle that could secure humanity's future. But in truth, it was little more than a controlled gamble with forces they barely understood. Isaac was the key to it all. Under heavy sedation and constant surveillance, he was subjected to an endless cycle of tests within the Noon Light diagnostics machine. The procedure tore through his memories and extracted fragments of the alien code, branded into his thoughts. Between sessions, he was drugged to the edge of amnesia, his mind kept fragile, impalpable, so neither he nor the marker's influence could fully take control. What EarthGov refused to admit, but Isaac had already learned too well, was that markers didn't just infect flesh. They rewrote minds. In 2511, the nightmare began again. The Sprawl, Titan Station's sprawling civilian sector, erupted into chaos as a necromorph infestation spread with terrifying speed. Amid the scream and gunfire, Isaac Clarke awoke in a padded cell, bound in a straitjacket. Marker symbols scrawled across every surface around him. His mind was a fog of broken memories, 3 lost years swallowed by the drugs and machines of EarthGov's experiments. The door burst open, and a man rushed in. Racco, breathless and desperate, he cut Isaac free, telling him he had to move. But salvation lasted only a heartbeat. In a flash of horror, Racco was impaled and twisted apart, transformed before Isaac's eyes into a necromorph. Isaac had no weapons, no armor, nothing but panic and survival instinct. As the creature lunged, somehow he managed to break free, stumbling into the blood-soaked corridors of the Sprawl, as the infection consumed everything around him. Alone, terrified and still half mad from his dementia, Isaac's only guide came through fragmented comms. Diana, Racco's superior. She told him that his condition, the visions, the madness, the obsession with marker symbols, was killing him. She could cure it, however. With no memory of the last 3 years and no one else to trust, Isaac clung to that promise. To reach her, he was forced to fight through hell itself. Twisting halls crawling with necromorphs, civilians turned into monstrosities, and EarthGov soldiers under the command of Director Hans Tideman. To them, Isaac wasn't a survivor. He was a liability. The man carrying the marker's secrets in his skull. To Tideman, that made him too dangerous to live. As Isaac fought his way through the Sprawl, he was never truly alone. The voice of Nicole, his lost love, haunted him at every turn. She appeared in flashes of blood and shadow, her words twisted into cruel taunts that clawed at the fragile walls of his sanity. Again and again she forced him to relive her suicide, mocking his desperate attempts to deny the pain. Each vision left him shaken, yet he pressed forward, driven by the faint hope that Diana might hold a cure he so desperately needed. His journey finally led him through the vast, ornate halls of the Sprawl's Church of Unitology. The air was thick of incense and whispers of devotion. The gilded walls a shrine to the faith that had cost him everything. It was there, within the heart of the church, that he reached Diana. But instead of salvation, he found betrayal. Diana was no rescuer. She was a devout Unitologist fanatic, sent not to save him, but to capture him. In that moment, the true scope of his predicament became horrifying and clear. Isaac was not simply surviving a necromorph outbreak. He was caught in the middle of a war. EarthGov wanted him dead, terrified of what he carried in his mind. The Church of Unitology, on the other hand, saw him as a holy vessel. The red marker on Aegis VII had imprinted his blueprints onto his mind, and to the faithful, he was the key to building more of their sacred relics. Isaac Clarke was no longer just a survivor. He had become the most valuable and most hunted man in the galaxy. Before Diana could tighten her grip, salvation came in the form of fire and fury. An EarthGov gunship roared into view, cutting down the gathered Unitologists with merciless precision. The reprieve, however, was no rescue. From the shadows came a hulking monstrosity, its wrapped form tearing through steel as it barreled down on Isaac. Panic drove him forward, scrambling through the collapsing maintenance halls as claws racked at the walls behind him. He fought with everything he had, weapon and will alike, until at last the beast crashed through the window with Isaac behind him, both of them slamming into the gunship. As Isaac fought to get away from the ship, the creature grabbed him once more, hoping to devour him there. Isaac shot, desperately trying to hit the creature, until one of his shots landed a critical shot on the explosive container on the side of the ship, destroying the creature and the ship in the same blast. Isaac fell through space, landing through the skylight of the nearby apartment building, leaving Isaac alone once more in the suffocating dark. In the silence that followed, a voice reached out to him over his comms. Familiar, fragmented, and unstable. Nolan Strauss. Isaac remembered him. A fellow subject from Project Telomere. Another soul broken by the Marker's experiments. Their encounters in Titan Station Ward had been fleeting, haunting, but enough for Isaac to recognize the truth. Strauss had seen what he had seen. He too carried the Marker's imprint in his mind, their alien code festering like a parasite. Now stranded with no allies or no way out, Isaac found himself tethered to a man as unstable as he was. If he wanted to survive the Sprawl, he would need to follow the voice of Nolan Strauss, whether it led to salvation or into an even deeper madness. Strauss's voice was erratic, broken by paranoia and obsession, but within his ramblings Isaac heard a sliver of hope. The scientist claimed to know a way to destroy the new Marker, an end to the nightmare that had consumed Titan Station. Clinging to that possibility, Isaac followed his guidance through the ruined Sprawl, each step a battle against Necromorph hordes in the tightening grip of EarthGov forces. It was during this struggle that Isaac crossed paths with another survivor, Ellie Langford, a CEC pilot hardened by loss and the brutality of the outbreak. She wanted nothing to do with him, seeing only another broken man teetering on the edge of madness. She refused his help and vanished into the chaos, determined to survive on her own terms. For a time, Isaac pressed on alone, following Strauss's fractured directions. But then Ellie's voice came through the comms, shaken but alive. She had found Strauss herself, and despite his madness, had chosen to keep him safe. Reluctantly, she reached out to Isaac. For all her distrust, she knew they stood a better chance together than apart. United by necessity, the three survivors carved their way towards the government sector, where the Marker pulsed like a cancer at the heart of the station. Again and again, Director Hans Timon tried to stop them, deploying troops, locking down systems, even detonating charges that tore entire sections of the Sprawl away into the void. Yet still Isaac, Ellie, and Strauss endured, their path littered with the dead, but lit by a single desperate goal, the destruction of the Marker. Their path eventually brought Isaac face to face with the ghost he had never expected to see again. Docked near Titan Station was the USG Ishimura, the ship that had nearly destroyed him 3 years before. Though scarred from the horrors of Aegis VII, the vessel had been painstakingly repaired, its corridors cleaned, its bulkheads reinforced. To others, it was just another mining relic restored for service. To Isaac, it was a tomb. Isaac was forced aboard when Director Timon, using the solar arrays to cut the bridge that linked the government sector to the civilian sector in half. Isaac stepped back into the Ishimura halls, and with every step the memories bled back. The screams, the blood, the walls that had once closed in around him. And with the memories came Nicole. Her visions were no longer fleeting and mournful. They were violent, insistent. She pressed him to his mind, telling the truth he refused to face. That what haunted him was not the Markers, not some alien curse, but his own inability to accept her death. He had been running from her memory since Aegis VII, twisting her into something else, something safer, instead of the grieving woman she truly was. Isaac fought against her words, but the more he resisted, the stronger she became. At the same time, Nolan Strauss unraveled completely. The man who had once spoken of salvation now descended to madness. In a sudden frenzy, he turned on Ellie, brutally removing one of her eyes in a delusional attempt to free her. Ellie barely survived, while Strauss fled deeper into the station. When Isaac finally confronted him, there was no trace of the man he had once known, only a mind consumed by the Marker visions and paranoia. With no other choice, Isaac fought back, and in the end, he was forced to kill Strauss with his own hands. The silence that followed was not relief, but grief. Another reminder of how the Markers destroyed not only lives, but souls. Isaac's path carried him through the Sprawl's mining sectors, a labyrinth of machinery and dust, where the walls seemed to close in with every step. It was there that Nicole's apparition struck at him with fury unlike before. She cornered him, her voice sharp as knives. She threatened to tear him apart unless he faced the truth he had buried beneath layers of denial and grief. At last Isaac broke. His defenses crumpled, and with a voice raw with anguish, he confessed what he had always known but never spoken. Nicole was his everything. She was the last tether he had to a life worth living, and without her, he would have nothing. He had clung to her image because he could not bear the weight of her death, because letting go meant accepting that he was alone in a universe that had already taken everything from him. The specter softened, the twisted, vengeful figure faded, and in her place stood Nicole, as she had been in life. For the first time since Aegis VII, Isaac saw her not as a torment, but as a woman he had loved. She had told him that acceptance would be his final trial, the last step he would need to confront once he reached the marker. Only then would his mission end. From the moment forward, Nicole no longer haunted him as a phantom of guilt. He became a guide, a quiet, peaceful presence walking beside him, leading him towards a marker and the fate that awaited them both. Isaac finally reunited with Ellie deep within the caverns of the Sprawl's mining sector. There, buried beneath rock and ruin, she had discovered a massive mobile drill, an industrial machine half broken and dormant. It was their only way forward, but its systems were crippled. Without hesitation, Isaac set to work, coaxing the dormant beast back to life with the practiced hands of an engineer who had spent his whole life fixing broken things. When the drill roared awake, the tunnel shook with its power. Ellie climbed into the cockpit, gripping the controls as Isaac took his place outside, ready for whatever the marker would throw at them. As the drill carved its way through stone and steel, an endless tide of Necromorphs swarmed from the walls, shrieking as they hurled themselves against the machine. Isaac fought them in the chaos of smoke and sparks, blasting apart twisted bodies that clawed for Ellie. His every shot the thin line between progress and annihilation. Together they pressed on, the drill grinding through the pulsating wall of organic flesh that had consumed the tunnels. When at last the machine broke through, the emergences shadowed the garment sector. For the first time, the heart of EarthGov's operation, and the marker itself, lay within reach. There amid the wreckage of their passage, Ellie discovered something Isaac had begun to believe impossible. A working gunship. At last, a chance to escape gleamed before them. Though Isaac knew the path of freedom was anything but clear, the gunship gleamed in the dark, a fragile promise of survival. For the first time in what felt years, escape was possible. Isaac stood outside its hatch, staring at Ellie as the weight of his decision settled on his shoulders. He had carried her this far, fought to keep her alive when everything else had been torn away. But the marker still loomed ahead, pulsating with the same rhythm that haunted him since Aegis VII. After a long silence, he made his choice. With steady hands, Isaac activated the gunship systems from the exterior panel. Sealing Ellie inside, she pounded on the glass, shouted for him to join her, but he shook his head. His voice was firm, though beneath it lay a deep sorrow. She had to go. She had to survive. For him, there was no escape. Ellie's protest broke into tears, her voice crackling as she begged him not to do this. Isaac forced a small smile, assuring her that she would be safe, that she had to live on. The gunship roared to life, and with one last look, she vanished into the void, leaving Isaac alone. Turning from the departing vessel, Isaac pressed onward, Nicole's apparition walking at his side, though she spoke gently now, guiding him through the ruined halls, doubt gnawing at him. What awaited him at the marker? What was he supposed to do? Nicole's answer was simple, cryptic. You'll know when the time comes. But EarthGov was not finished with him. Director Timon's personal troops descended, sealing off the sector in the final attempt to contain him. Outnumbered and outgunned, Isaac turned the station itself into a weapon. He cut the power, plunging the sector into darkness, and unleashed the Necromorph hordes that had been sealed within. The soldiers' cries of terror echoed through the halls as they were torn apart, giving Isaac the opening he needed. And so, guided by the memory of the woman he could not let go, Isaac continued his march towards the marker, into the very heart of madness. The path to the marker brought Isaac to the machine, the one Nolan Strauss had raved about in his fractured mind, the one that had ultimately driven him into madness. Its cold frame loomed over him, a monstrous device of steel and restraints, designed to reach into the deepest recesses of the human brain. Isaac knew what it demanded. If he wanted to finish this, if he wanted to face the marker, he would have to submit to it. The machine came alive with a hiss of hydraulics, locking him into place. As it agonizingly drilled into his eyes, piercing through his flesh and thought alike, he screamed, his body convulsing as the device tore open the sealed chambers of his mind, to bury codes, to marker blueprints, and the memories EarthGov had suppressed came flooding back in a torrent of unbearable clarity. When it was over, Isaac staggered free, his skull burning with the marker's design. but his path clearer than it had ever been. At his side stood Nicole, not the twisted tormentor that had haunted him, but a steady presence, calm and guiding. For the first time, he did not resist her. Together they pressed onward towards the marker. But by then, the Necromorphs had already converged in staggering numbers, their bodies spilling into the chamber around the marker. Their sheer mass was enough to trigger the beginnings of convergence. The event Isaac had only heard whispered in nightmare visions. He turned to Nicole, desperation cutting through his voice, asking what the marker was doing. Her reply was quiet, what it was made to do. Isaac, you have to make us whole. The halls to the marker trembled with every step, the air filled with shrieks of Necromorphs. Among them stalked an Ubermorph, a grotesque, unkillable predator that pursued Isaac relentlessly, regenerating every wound he inflicted. Only through desperate evasion and fire did he manage to keep ahead of it, forcing his battered body onward until, at last, the marker loomed before him. There, waiting in the shadow of his colossal monolith, stood Director Hans Tiedemann. His body was broken, burned and bloody by the chaos he had unleashed, but his fury burned hotter than his wounds. With nothing left to lose, he hurled himself at Isaac, determined to kill the man he blamed for unraveling his work. The fight was brutal and desperate, ending only when Isaac wrenched the weapon from Tiemann's hand and turned it back on him. The director fell, lifeless, another casualty in the marker's long trail of ruin. Then Nicole appeared, for the final time. She came to him not as a tormentor, but as a lover. She embraced him before the marker, her voice soft, thanking him for carrying her this far. She told him it was time for the last step, acceptance. Her words became a knife. Isaac, as the unwilling architect of Site 12 marker, must now die. His body would be absorbed, she said, feeding convergence, the rebirth of humanity into a single, unified form. Isaac's grief ignited into rage. As the marker pulsed, he was dragged into a psychic limbo, battlefield within his own mind. There, Nicole's phantom pressed in on him, pleading, taunting, urging him to surrender, to let go, to be made whole. The walls shook with every clash of will. Isaac's sanity stretched to his breaking point, but he refused. With every ounce of strength left to him, Isaac fought back, not against Nicole, but against the illusion, the marker's manipulation that had twisted her memory into a weapon. At last he struck her down, shattering the phantom in the marker with her. The great spire cracked and imploded, its signal silenced, its hold over Isaac finally broken. For the first time in years, he was free. As the marker crumbled into ruin and the station buckled around him, Isaac felt a strange calm settle over his mind. The visions were gone, the whispers silenced. For the first time in years, his head was his own. And yet, he made no move to flee. He closed his eyes, resigned to die with the marker, content to let the collapsing sector bury him with the horrors he had endured. The ceiling above shattered in a roar of steel and flame as Ellie Langford burst through, in the very gunship he had sent her away in. Her voice crackled over the comms, shouting for him to move. For a moment Isaac didn't believe it, convinced it was another cruel trick of his broken mind. Then, survival instinct surged. As the chamber gave way, Isaac engaged his rig's thrusters, launching himself upward towards the falling debris. Fire licked at his heels as the chamber collapsed, but he slammed to the gunship's open bay just as the sector gave way entirely. Ellie rushed the ship clear, piloting them out of Titan Station's death throes as the Sprawl fell into the chaos behind them. Isaac slumped into the co-pilot's seat, staring blankly ahead. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths, his mind still waiting for the illusion to crack, for Nicole's bloody face to lunge from the shadows and remind him that freedom was impossible. Instead, when he turned, all he saw was Ellie, alive, exhausted, and grateful. For the first time since Aegis VII, Isaac Clarke was not alone. In the aftermath of Titan Station's destruction, Isaac and Ellie vanished from the public eye. Both EarthGov and Unitologists considered him too valuable and too dangerous to be left free, so the pair slipped into hiding. For the first time, they built a fragile life together, finding refuge in the Red Moon apartments on New Horizons colony, nestled on Luna. What grew between them was more than survival. Shared scars and battles had forged something deeper. And in the quiet of their exile, Isaac and Ellie became lovers. Yet even in her arms, Isaac could not escape the shadow of the marker. Though he had shattered his hold on Titan Station, his residue lingered. His mind still pulsed with the blueprints. The alien code burned into him years ago in Aegis VII. At night, his sleep was broken by whispers. At day, his sounds gnawed at the space between them. Ellie tried to pull him back into the world, to fight for something beyond survival and grief. But Isaac retreated further, burying himself in denial, in drink, in the hollow comforts of isolation. She began to see him not for the man who had saved her, but a man who had surrendered, who had given up on the future. Finally, unable to watch him wither any longer, Ellie left. She walked away from the Red Moon apartments and from Isaac himself, her absence cutting deeper than any Necromorph's claws. And Isaac once again was alone. With only the ghosts of the markers past for company, Isaac drifted deeper into isolation. He shut out the galaxy and its conflicts, blind to the escalating war between EarthGov and the increasingly militant Unitologists. His world shrank to the walls of Red Moon apartments, where grief and regret suffocated him in equal measure. Ellie's absence was a wound that refused to heal, and without her, Isaac buried himself in denial, clinging to the illusion that if he stayed hidden, the universe would forget about him. But the universe did not forget. One day, without warning, his door exploded inward. Armed soldiers stormed into the apartment, weapons raised, dragging Isaac from his solitude. Among them were Captain Robert Norton and Sergeant John Carver of Earth Defense Force. They weren't there to kill him. They were there because they needed him. Norton wasted little time on pleasantries. The situation was dire. Markers were spreading, humanity teetered on the brink, and only Isaac carried the knowledge to stop them. But Isaac had heard these pleas before. He refused, weary of being used as a tool, of being dragged into the same nightmare again and again. Then Norton spoke the one name that shattered his resistance: Ellie. She had gone missing near the frozen world of Volantis, the supposed source of the marker's power. Whatever had happened, she was in danger. The moment the words left Norton's mouth, Isaac's resolve broke. No matter how deep his despair, no matter how much he wished to be free of the nightmare, he could not abandon her. Against every instinct for self-preservation, Isaac agreed. For Ellie, he would return to the darkness. Isaac's reluctant return to the fight was almost immediately consumed by chaos. The New Horizons colony, the place he had once called home, erupted into war. The Circle, a violent Unitologist sect led by the zealot Jacob Danik, struck with surgical precision. Explosions ripped through the colony. Soldiers clashed in the streets, and civilians were slaughtered as the fanatics carved a bloody path towards a true target, EarthGov itself. Separated from Norton and Carver amid the fighting, Isaac found himself hunted through the colony's burning districts. It wasn't long before Danik himself confronted him. Surrounded and bound, Isaac was forced to listen as the Unitologist leader laid bare his vision. EarthGov was corrupt, humanity's survival a lie, and only the markers promised salvation. To prove his devotion, Danik orchestrated a devastating act of sabotage, destroying the colony's marker test lab. Isaac could do nothing but watch as the chamber tore apart in fire and steel, unleashing the infection upon New Horizon. Necromorphs flooded the colony within minutes, tearing through soldiers and civilians alike. Isaac broke free of his captors and fled into the chaos. Every street now a battlefield where the living and the dead were equally doomed. Danik's fanatics hunted him at every turn. While the Necromorphs transformed the city into a screaming avatar, through fire, blood, and shadow, Isaac fought his way back to Norton and Carver. Together, the three men escaped aboard the USM Endora, leaving the colony behind as it collapsed into madness. As the USM Endora entered orbit, the shattered remains of the Sovereign Colony's fleet came alive. Remote mines, left adrift among the wreckage, locked onto the ship and tore into its hull with merciless precision. Explosions rocked the vessel, alarms blared, and the Endora's fate was sealed. Isaac acted fast. Amid the chaos, he found the ship's pilots, Mark Rosen and Locke, and realized their only hope was the escape module. Strapping into an EVA suit, he forced open the launch protocols and braved the void himself. The airlock hissed behind him as he stepped into open space. Outside, Isaac clung to the battered hull as fragments of debris and burning metal withered past. He reached the escape module, hands shaking against the cold steel. and disengaged its locks from exterior. With a thunderous release, the pod tore free, just as the door erupted into a chain of detonations, shattering into pieces among them. The module spun violently into the debris field, flung headlong into the graveyard of warships. Inside, Norton hung on desperately, trying to stabilize his descent. Isaac and Carver launched from the wreckage in a close pursuit, their thrusters blazing as they weaved through drifting hulks and explosive mines. Against all odds, the survivors clawed their way through the wreckage and managed to dock with an abandoned vessel drifting among the ruins. The CMS Roanoke, a derelict relic of an old sovereign colony's fleet. Its halls were dark and lifeless, but for Isaac it was enough. Inside, he was reunited with the scattered crew of the Endora, and with Ellie. Relief surged through him at the sight of her being alive, but it was quickly tempered by a painful truth. She was no longer his. Time apart, and Isaac descended to despair, had driven a wedge too deep to mend. And now, Ellie's bond was with Captain Robert Norton, her partner in survival and command. The sting of betrayal and regret cut Isaac deeply, though he buried it beneath the urgency of their mission. Among the group were others who carried their own vital roles. Jennifer Santos, a skilled technician, lent her technical expertise to restore power. Austin Buckle, a hardened marker operative, brought with him grim knowledge of the artifacts they hunted. Together, the crew uncovered the lead, a shuttle locked away aboard the CMS Terra Nova. When they found it, the vessel CMS Crozier was battered, its systems failing, little more than a hulk that had somehow clung to survival. Yet in its broken frame lay their only hope of reaching the frozen surface of Volantis. To succeed, Isaac and the others would have to breathe life back into the Crozier, one piece of rusted steel at a time. While scouring the Roanoke for answers, Ellie uncovered the late Admiral Marjorie Graves' quarters. The room was a shrine of madness. Walls covered in marker inscriptions, scrawled in a fevered hand. The cryptic symbols promised direction, if only someone could untangle them. Isaac stepped forward, though he loathed the knowledge the markers had burned into his mind. It was a curse he could not escape. And now, it was one thing that could guide them. He decrypted the animal's ramblings. Hidden in the chaos was a revelation. Graves had discovered a vast machine, something ancient and buried deep beneath Volantis. Its purpose was not to create markers, but to control them. Again and again, her notes repeated the same phrase, as with growing desperation. Turn it off. The implications were staggering. Ellie's voice was steady as she drew conclusions. Volantis was not just another colony world. It was the marker home world. If they could find this machine, perhaps they could silence the markers once and for all. But not everyone shared her conviction. Norton's voice broke through the silence, urgent and sharp. He wanted no part of this obsession, no part of plunging deeper into danger. They had the chance to escape, to survive, and he begged them to take it. Yet Isaac, Ellie, and the marker ops team, Buckle and Santos, stood firm. The truth was too close and too dangerous to abandon now. The arguments came to a head as the crew prepared the shuttle. Norton's patient head frayed to nothing, his voice sharp with anger as he turned on Isaac. He accused him of siding with Ellie, not out of duty, but out of lingering feelings, a desperate attempt to win back what he had already lost. To Norton, the mission was suicide, and worse, it was dragging Ellie into certain death. He pressed Isaac, imploring him to walk away. They had a ship, a chance to flee the madness. If Isaac truly cared for Ellie, he said, he would keep her safe instead of feeding her into the maw of a doomed crusade. But Isaac stood his ground, his voice weary but unwavering, cut through Norton's desperation. They couldn't run. If they turned their backs now, the markers would consume everything. Escape would only buy time, and not much of it. To Isaac, the truth was simple. If they didn't try, everyone was already dead. Norton bristled, bitterness flashing in his eyes, but his protest fell flat against the grim resolve shared by Isaac, Ellie, and the marker ops team. With the shuttle secured and ready for flight, the crew gathered inside. The engines roared to life, rattling the deck beneath their boots. Through the viewports, the pale marble of Volantis loomed, covered in storms and shadows. As they broke orbit, the icy world filled with vision, a graveyard of secrets waiting to be unearthed. The shuttle tilted forward, its nose cutting in the atmosphere, fire licking at its hull as the descent began. The storm swallowed them whole. The entire mission entered its next most perilous stage. The descent into Volantis was chaos from the first moment. The shuttle buckled violently as storms battered its hull, alarms blaring as the crew clung to whatever they could. Then came the impact, debris tearing loose, fire cascading through the cabin, and the world spitting into a blur of flame and ice. Crashed tore the vessel apart, killing Rosen and Locke instantly, and scattering the survivors across the frozen wasteland. Isaac came to, half buried in snow and twisted wreckage. Every breath cut like knives in his body wrecked by hypothermia. The storm howled around him. Staggering through the wreckage, he found salvation, and only in the burning debris, pressing him close to the flames to drive the coal from his bones. But fire alone could not ease his fear. The crew was gone. Isaac scoured the wreckage, desperate for proof they had survived. His hands shook when he found it, a recording device. He activated it, and relief washed over him as Ellie's face flickered onto the screen, along with the voices of the others. They were alive. They had made it out. Guided by the trail they had left behind, flares glowing faintly in the storm, Isaac pressed forward, each step a battle against the cold and exhaustion. At last, he stumbled into the remnants of a half-buried structure. Inside, the wind died, and in the dim light, Isaac found Austin Buckle, sprawled on the floor, the bunker operative barely clinging to life. His breath came shallow, his body broken by the crash, and Isaac realized with a hollow dread that Buckle's time was running out. Isaac knelt beside Buckle, his breath misting in the freezing air. The bunker operative's voice was weak, words breaking into ragged gasps, but his eyes burned with conviction, repeating the same desperate plea Isaac had already heard, etched into the walls and whispered in his own mind. "Turn it off. You have to turn it off." Moments later, his voice faltered, his chest stilled, and Buckle was gone. Left alone in the frozen wastes, Isaac scattered through the wreckage until he found salvation, a rig designed specifically for the brutal cold of Volantis. Its reinforced plating and thermal systems gave him a fighting chance against the killing winds. Suiting up, he pressed on through the storm, his visor catching the faint glow of flares in the distance. At last, he caught up to Ellie, Santos, and the others. In his absence, Santos had managed to piece together fragments of the research they had sought, evidence of experiments tied to the machine and the markers. It wasn't complete, but it was enough to strengthen their resolve. Together, they set out towards a warehouse where the data might lead them closer to the truth. They never made it that far. As the team pushed forward, Danik and his Unitology soldiers struck, their fanatical chants drowned out by only the crack of gunfire. Chaos split the group apart, and Isaac found himself driven from the others, forced into a desperate fight through snow-choked alleys and collapsing ruins. The Unitologists hunted him relentlessly, but Isaac survived, carving a bloody path until at last he forced his way into the warehouse. There, amid the shadows and sounds, he reunited with the others once more. For a moment, against the backdrop of Volantis' endless storm, the mission still lived. Inside the warehouse, the team discovered something monstrous attuned in ice, a vast frozen necromorph hive mind, its towering form locked in a deathless slumber beneath layers of frost. Carved into its grotesque anatomy were signals, tangled and pulsing faintly, that could be traced back to the machine itself. They could daw it, they could triangulate the patterns within its body. It might finally lead them to the heart of Volantis' secret. Isaac descended to the creature's stomach, activating the signal so the team could trace it back to the machine. As Isaac came back up the chute, Norton betrayed him, leaving Isaac trapped in the elevator that lowered him down into the creature's stomach. After Isaac escaped, he tried to catch up to Norton, but before he could, just as he opened the doors to the outside, the circle struck. Danik and his soldiers surrounded them, weapons raised, forcing Isaac, Carver, and Norton to their knees. It was then the truth spilled out like poison. Norton had betrayed them. Under the guise of protecting Ellie, he had made a deal with Danik, deliver Isaac, the marker's prophet, in exchange for safe passage off-world. Yet predictably, Danik lied. With a sneer, he revealed he had no intention of honoring the bargain. Instead, he would execute them all and claim the marker's legacy for Unitology. The execution never came. Isaac lunged at Danik. Gunfire and shrieking necromorphs collided in a storm of violence. Amid the struggle, the Nexus began to stir. Its immense body crackled free of the ice of prison, its roar shaking the walls. In the confusion, Isaac was dragged into his cavernous maw, swallowed whole. Inside the nightmare's belly, he fought for his life, blasting through layers of flesh and bone until at last he tore his way out, staggering back into the frozen air. In the aftermath of the battle, the fragile unity of the survivors collapsed. Norton turned on Isaac, his rage boiling over. He accused Isaac of ruining everything, of dragging them into hell, of dooming Ellie, of causing every death since Aegis VII. The argument between Norton and Isaac shattered into violence. Rage boiling over, Norton leveled his weapon and opened fire on Isaac. Instinct took over. Isaac returned fire. His shot struck true, ending Norton's fury with a single round to the head. Silence followed, broken only by howling wind. When the survivors regrouped, Isaac tried to explain to Ellie what happened. That Norton gave no other choice, that it was self-defense. But Ellie, stricken with grief and fury, refused to hear it. To her, Norton was gone because of Isaac, and the fracture between them deepened into a chasm. Amid the turmoil, Santos pressed on with her work. In the recovered research she uncovered, mentions of a device called the Codex, a tool scientists believe could control or perhaps even shut down the machine itself. She also found reference to something or someone called Rosetta, a guide that might show them how. The trail led to an abandoned laboratory perched high atop a mountain peak. Climb was brutal, icy winds battering them as they ascended, ground treacherous beneath their feet. Then without warning, the snow beast attacked. Its massive bulk slammed into the cliffside, scattering the team like snowflakes. Santos was caught on a suspended cargo cage when the creature's thrashing nearly tore the entire mountainside apart. Carver acted without hesitation. Gripping his cutter, he severed the cable holding the cage, sending Santos plummeting into the abyss. Her scream was lost to the storm, her body swallowed by the void. Cliffside stabilized, and the rest of the team spared, but her sacrifice was unwilling. Her life cut short so others might survive. Isaac stared into the storm where Santos had vanished, another weight pressing on his already fractured conscience. Isaac pushed on and eventually reached the laboratory where Ellie and Carver were waiting. The tension between them broke at last when Ellie looked him in the eye. He confessed what had been weighed on him since Luna, that he had given up, not only on the fight, but on the whole world itself. Ellie's response was soft but firm, pulling him back from despair. He was a good man, no matter what the mistakes that haunted him. For a fleeting moment, Isaac felt the warmth of her forgiveness, a spark of strength reigniting within him. Together the three explored the lab and uncovered the truth behind Rosetta. The name had not belonged to a human researcher, but to something far older. An alien life form. His body had been dissected, carved into separate grotesque sections and preserved like specimens. As they pieced the remains together, Rosetta's terrible story unfolded. The lab's machinery came alive. With Ellie and Carver standing by, Isaac initiated the scan. The equipment whirled, a pulse of alien code searing through his mind. Suddenly he was no longer in the lab, but inside Rosetta's memories. Forced to witness the truth of Volantis, he saw a world alive with oceans and strange life, home to an intelligent species, Rosetta's people. They had uncovered a black marker, an artifact of impossible power. At first it promised knowledge and energy, but as with all markers, its true nature revealed itself too late. The signal spread, rewriting flesh and mind alike, and soon Volantis was overrun by Necromorphs. The infestation swelled until the planet itself seemed consumed. With enough biomass collected, the next stage began. Convergence. Isaac saw titanic tendrils of necromorph flesh rising, dragging organic matter, corpses, and the like into orbit. All of it fed into a single, nightmarish process. Alongside the marker itself, the mass was woven together to form something greater. A brethren moon. The very same moon now hanging in silence above Volantis. But Rosetta's people had not surrendered. Facing extinction, they pulled the last of their strength and resources into one final, desperate gambit. They built a machine the size of a city, a construct of unimaginable power. Its power was singular, to stop convergence. And when they activated it, Volantis was a flash frozen in an instant. Oceans crystallized, storms encased on the surface, and the process of ascension was halted mid-birth. The Brenner moon was trapped in orbit, incomplete, its hunger restrained by ice and silence. The vision ended, leaving Isaac gasping in the lab. He now understood the truth. Volantis was now salvation. It was a tomb, a graveyard holding the frozen remains of a failed convergence event. And the machine still waited, buried beneath the ice, daring anyone bold or foolish enough to turn it off. The vision of Rosetta's memory still echoed in Isaac's mind as he explained what he had seen. The black marker, the Necromorph infestation, never realizing the others were listening. From the shadows, Danik and his circle soldiers stormed the lab. With cold certainty, he seized the Codex from Isaac's hands. The artifact, the very key to the machine, was now his. Isaac fought back in desperation, slamming his hand against the console to trigger the lab's decontamination protocol. The alarms blared, and clouds of corrosive gas hissed from the fence, filling the chamber in a choking mist. Soldiers screamed as their armor dissolved and flesh burned away. But the victory came at a price. In the chaos, Danik escaped, carrying the Codex with him. Worse, the gas sealed off sections of the lab, cutting Ellie off from Isaac and Carver, her voice trembling as she realized the truth. There was no way out for her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at Isaac one last time, choking back sobs, "Save yourselves." Isaac's chest tightened, his heart breaking as every instinct screamed to fight, to find another way. But there was none. Carver dragged him back as the door slammed shut, cutting Ellie off in a veil of smoke and fire. His voice lingered in Isaac's ears, long after silence fell. Once again, Isaac Clarke had lost the woman he loved. Grief sharpened into fury. With Ellie seemingly lost, Isaac and Carver cut their way through Danik's forces, tearing through the last Unitologist soldiers in the storm of gunfire and rage. Nothing would stop them. Not faith, not fanatics, not even the Necromorph hordes that filled the ruins. At last, bloody but unbroken, they wrenched the Codex from Danik's grasp and pushed forward, descending deep into the frozen crust of Volantis. There, beneath miles of ice, they found it, the buried alien city. Its towering spires and impossible machinery stretched into the dark. An necropolis carved not for the living, but for the species that had sacrificed everything to halt the markers. At the heart of it pulsed the machine, the ancient engine that held convergence and stasis. Isaac's mind ached with its signal, but now, finally, he understood how to use it. Yet Danik was waiting. He held Ellie at his mercy. Somehow, she had escaped the gas, only to be recaptured and bound before the machine's core. Danik's sneer cut through the chamber as he raised his weapon to her head. He demanded the Codex, and if refused, Ellie would die where she stood. Isaac faltered, torn between duty and love. When Carver stepped forward, hardened by loss, driven by desperate need for redemption. Carver made the choice for him. He ripped the Codex from Isaac's hands and hurled it across the chamber. Danik caught it, releasing Ellie as promised. With trembling hands, Danik activated the Codex, only not to save humanity, but to damn it. The machine fell silent, its suppression broken. Convergence event roared back to life. The incomplete brother moon, long shackled in orbit, shuddered awake, freed from the machine's grip. It descended towards Volantis with apocalyptic hunger. The planet's surface peeled away in great, screaming layers. Continents ripped into the sky as if the world itself were being devoured. The alien necropolis splintered beneath their feet, old towers collapsing onto the abyss as the city was consumed. Above, the vast, terrible shape of the brother moon loomed, no longer trapped but rising, ascending to claim its place among the stars. Danik's triumph was short-lived. As he reveled in the resurrection of convergence, the earth itself betrayed him. A jagged column of falling debris impaled him where he stood, cutting off his victory cry in a spray of blood and silence. The alien city shook apart as the moon began to feed, tearing whole spires and mountains into the sky. Isaac and Carver realized the grim truth. There was no surviving this, no escape for them both. The odds were too vast, the enemy too monstrous. For Isaac, there was only one choice left to make. He turned to Ellie amid the storm and fire. He kissed her one last time, a wordless farewell, and sent her to his shuttle. She resisted, tears in her eyes, but Isaac pressed her forward, telling her to live. Her departure ripped a hole in his heart, but as her shuttle streaked into the void, Isaac found a grim resolve. Together, he and Carver plunged into the chaos of the collapsing city. Necromorph hordes poured from every fissure, shrieking as the alien structures fell into the abyss. Fighting shoulder to shoulder, they carved the path through the ruin and fire. climbing toward the Codex as the ground split beneath their boots. At last they were pulled upward into the very body of the brother moon, his flesh closing around them like a maw of a god. Inside his vast writhing chambers, they reached the machine. With the Codex in hand, Isaac and Carver forced his systems alive, reactivating the alien construct and restoring its true function. The moon shrieked in defiance as the machine's power ripped through it. Convergence events shuddered and died. The process reversed. Freed biomass rained from orbit, the necropolis itself collapsing into ruin. Then with a final, catastrophic groan, the brother moon fell, crashing into Volantis in an impact so vast it shattered both city and world alike. In the blinding light of cataclysm, Isaac Clarke and John Carver vanished, their face swallowed by the ruins of Volantis. Ellie sat alone in the cockpit of her shuttle, the glow of the console lights casting long shadows across her face. Behind her, Volantis was tearing itself apart. The colossal brother moon, once poised to ascend, now plummeted towards the surface in pieces, its vast body shrieking as it broke apart in the atmosphere. Her instruments flickered with readings, and for the first time since the nightmare began, the signal was gone. The endless marker pulse, the maddening whisper that haunted every channel, had vanished. Ellie exhaled a trembling breath, grief and relief mingling into something hollow but steady. Isaac had done it. He had stopped convergence, and though he was gone, she clung to the knowledge that his sacrifice had saved them all. Eyes damp, she set her course from Earth. The engines flared, and the shuttle lifted away from the dying orbit of Volantis, leaving behind fire, ruin, and silence. Isaac's eyes opened to the darkness and fire. The last thing he remembered was the blinding collapse of the brother moon as the machine tore itself apart. But somehow, impossibly, he and Carver had survived. They leaked deep underground, the alien city reduced to rubble around them. The world of cataclysm, still echoing in the distance. Bruised, bloody but alive, the two men clawed their way to the surface through a world that had become unrecognizable. The storms had quieted, the planet scarred by impact, but the silence was heavy, unnatural, as if something still lingered. Scavenging among the wreckage of the Unitologist forces, Isaac and Carver claimed the ship. It was battered but functional, enough to claw free of Volantis' gravity well. As the planet dwindled behind them, the men finally allowed themselves a moment of breath. Against all odds, they had survived. With survival came a grim realization. The vessel had no shock point drive. Without one, there would be no return to Earth. No way home. Their only chance lay in the remains of the Sovereign Colony's flotilla, still orbiting Volantis. Among the shattered hulks of the fleet, one ship remained intact, the CMS Terra Nova. Within it was the drive they needed. Aboard the CMS Terra Nova, Isaac and Carver fought through one final gauntlet of horrors. The Unitologists that had remained had rallied around the new, self-proclaimed prophet, clinging to their delusions even as the galaxy collapsed around them. Fanatics and Necromorphs alike filled the ship's halls, but together the two men cut their way through, silencing both the prophet and his cult in a storm of violence. With the ship secured, they had at last claimed the shock point drive. For the first time since Volantis, the path home lay open. Terra Nova surged into the void, and as frozen world fell behind them, Earth lay ahead, a fragile hope glimmering in the dark. As the ship reached the edge of the Sol system, the void itself stirred. The brother moons had already come, vast and terrible, their corpses of worlds hanging like gods above the Earth. One shifted, its colossal bulk rising from the abyss, and its signal struck Isaac and Carver like a blade to the brain. The dimension returned by apocalyptic force. Visions screamed through their minds, marker glyphs searing into their eyes, voices clawing at their sanity. The two men collapsed, writhing, their screams echoing through the ship as the shadow of the moon eclipsed their last shred of hope. Whether they lived or died in that moment remains unknown. Their fate, like humanity's, was swallowed in silence beneath the gaze of the brother moons.